Caribbean business plan to ship fresh water. Freshwater crisis in the Caribbean. The Caribbean islands are facing a freshwater crisis. Water everywhere, but not the type we can drink. I became aware of the freshwater becoming a commodity of high value. At the same time, I was aware of land parcels becoming marketable commodities. Asking the question about the status of our drinking water, I soon discovered that there was a freshwater crisis, but it differed from island to island. In the northeastern islands between Antigua and the U.S. Virgin Islands, this shortage was attributed to very low annual rainfall levels. All of the islands north and west of Antigua had annual rainfall levels below 50 inches per year. As you traveled southward, however, along the chain of islands, the precipitation rates increased. A second important piece of information was that the rainfall level in the island of Dominica was recorded in excess of 300 inches per annum. It was as if all the rain fell in Dominica, leaving none for the northwestern islands of the Lesser Antilles. Here was an interesting fact. If you were to add the rainfall level in Dominica to those of islands to the north, the average rainfall of the entire subgroup would be increased by 31%. This is why you need to be careful using averages to describe physical phenomena. Understanding the water crisis in these islands required more than a casual analysis. The severity of the drought in 2011 brought this crisis to a head, but herein lay our first mistake. The conventional wisdom continued to treat the water crisis as a meteorological outcome. If the rainy season was not wet enough and the dry season was really dry, ipso facto, we would most likely have an island-wide water crisis. It soon became apparent to some of us that speaking of the Caribbean's water crisis as a problem caused by an extended drought was not a useful starting point. If I Could Stop the Rain from Falling is a song, not a policy. It made little sense to view the persistent water shortages in the Eastern Caribbean as separate recurring events, droughts. Rather, this was an indication of a system that was continually producing a water deficit situation. Water deficit concept is not an explanation of the effect of drought. It is an explanation of the imbalance between the rate of replenishment of our water supply, rainfall, and the rate of extraction from our reserve base. Kept re-emphasizing this concept of a water deficit in order to advance our understanding that this situation reoccurs outside of the ambit of any singular seasonal event. Water shortages in these islands were like that chronic cough. It just wasn't going away. Surprisingly enough, many of the professional studies of water security in the Eastern Caribbean failed to make this vital connection. That was that the island of Dominica was not in the same position as that of the other Caribbean islands. We had speculated on this blatant lack of local knowledge, attributing it to such factors as water stress being analyzed as a meteorological issue, drought, and that the Met forecasts for all of the islands were virtually the same. Most decision makers looked for the solution to their water supply needs within the limits of their own national boundaries and not on a regional basis. And many policy analysts appear to be unaware of the fact that Dominica is the only island in the Eastern Caribbean which has a water surplus. How should we think about this life-giving substance of water? For the casual observer, solving the freshwater crisis in the Eastern Caribbean is probably like praying to Quetzalcoatl, the Mayan rain god, to fill our reservoirs, or alternatively, enticing investors to build our water infrastructure with the latest desalination technology. In our experience, we had witnessed three dynamic relationships that defined the water crisis. These were as follows. It was a crisis of governance, not of technology at source, nor of uses at end of pipe, nor expansiveness of the distribution reach. It was the water technology, not the water itself, that is prone to market discipline at the expense of the social benefits of the product. That the observable water availability was somewhat distorted because water is an uncooperative commodity. You cannot impose even the minimum of market discipline without compromising the social value in access. Leila Harris, the co-director of the Program on Water Governance at the University of British Columbia, had a wonderful way of expressing this notion. She thought that our concern with our own personal vulnerability clouded our understanding of this problem on the global stage. She would put it this way. By moving beyond the notions of the autonomous individual and the singular state, there is the potential to open a wide range of possibilities to re-envision water in a more environmentally sustainable and socially just way. Is that what we needed? These independent island states to surmount their insularity and find a new expression of unity around such an issue as freshwater? I most certainly think that they will be forced to do so within the next 5 years. Allocation and reallocation. My starting point in water management in the Caribbean was one that differed from the conventional wisdom. To start with, the whole scenario described in editorials and research papers focused the water issue on singular things such as technical infrastructure, planning approaches, regulations, engineering practices, and business models. This is how they think without even flexing their cerebral membranes. This thinking is so reflexive that if one is not too careful, regionalizing a solution can easily be interpreted as supersizing a spent remedy. That is, just build desalination plants everywhere. It doesn't take much depth to arrive at that solution. Let us start with the two words that appear on the shores as water flows through the national water system. These are allocation and reallocation. Water resource management is about the allocation and reallocation of this resource to communities in need. The activities of planning, developing, distributing, and managing the optimum use of water resources are all subsets of this allocative process. In fact, the failure of the water system to allocate sufficient water to any specific group, be it farmers, urban dwellers, or the manufacturing sector, is usually considered as evidence of mismanagement of water resources. It is not uncommon to hear rural communities complain that they are taking our water and giving it to the people in town. One way of keeping more water for the people upstream is to supplement the downstream water supply from other sources. This is a different type of allocation. Here, we are mixing the sources in a deliberate way so as to achieve the most of our allocative goals. Water portfolio management. When we start to treat the different sources of water as if they were assets in a portfolio and managing the risks for maximum returns, we are into the exercise of portfolio management. This is the realism that led me to coin the term water portfolio management in 2011. We were moving the perspective forward by defining a solution to water scarcity that distinguishes between a stock and a flow of water. Water portfolio management really opened a new can of worms, one that we neither suspected nor were we technically equipped to handle. In portfolio management, it is never an either or nothing scenario. It is the mix that optimizes the outflow. That mix will change as circumstances in specific sources change. In achieving the optimum mix, there is a marginal cost-benefit balance that is achievable. This, however, is more a technical matter than an economic one. Maximizing the total water flow means that we must get the same benefits on the margin from each additional source. First, the boundary limit. In most cases, it's a technical limit, which if breached will show up in terms of cost, vulnerability exposure, or integrity of the source. For example, drawing down in excess of 40% of an aquifer in some cases lowers the pressure in the vein and may allow for saltwater intrusion. Similarly, failing to desilt a reservoir on time will automatically reduce the productive capacity of the reservoir. Portfolio management is, however, not the standard practice of water authorities even to this day. They are still wedded to what is known as water demand management. Its aim is to manage a reduced water supply in a way that would satisfy as many immediate needs as is possible. Their current strategy is twofold. Seek to improve the productivity of the local water supply system while simultaneously minimizing household demand. Water demand management has 4 elements close to its heart. A. Controlling the growth in the demand and eliminating waste. B. Matching national water demand to the perceived limits of the national local water supply sources. C. Providing water to the public at an affordable price. And D. Relying on seasonal rainfall levels or artificially manufactured drinking water, that is desalination, to replenish your supply. Importing fresh water in bulk. We have seen the rise of water as a tradable commodity. The different brands of bottled water attest to this condition. On the national level, however, there is a missing link, and that was the option to import fresh water in bulk from a reliable source, Dominica. I have analyzed this project in much detail in an earlier publication titled Deluge. There are 2 game changers lurking in the corridors of Caribbean power. There are an energy pipeline coming out of Trinidad and or possibly Barbados into the Eastern Caribbean states, and simultaneously a water transshipment supply line coming out of Dominica's abundant water supplies. The impetus for both would be an attempt at regional rebalancing in member states' per capita water availability, resilience to climate change impact, and a narrowing of the range in energy and water supply costs between countries in the Caribbean community. The entire development game will change when the Caribbean is able to muster enough know-how and political will to convince international financial capital to support such a venture. Until that time, we will continue to live without meaningful purpose in ordinary time.